What is this?
Hey! Hello. This is our very first live ever.
So we don't 100% know if everything's working properly. So if you can see this and you can hear this, just give us a thumbs up in the chat so we know everything's working good. Hi, y'all.
Carol, hi.
A message.
Hey, Tina. You look so washed out. The window?
Yeah, it might be.
Oh, yeah, let's do that.
Okay.
Molly, Mark, Kelly. It's not Mark, it's Kelly. Carmen, Denise, Rebecca, Kathy.
Okay, we got everybody saying hi, but can you hear us okay?
Can you hear us? Yes.
That means it's a go.
Okay. Well, thank you. It's 4 o'clock in Arizona time. That's where we are. 5 o'clock Central time. We're going to hop right into it. This is our very first topical discussion. I do plan on doing more of these. And so I wanted to start with protein because that's what the challenge group is currently on. Okay. So I do have some notes here to help me stay focused. But Erin is going to be looking through all of the comments and interrupting as necessary for questions. So please send your questions through as you have them. A little bit of information about myself. I think a lot of the people on this live are challenge participants and one-on-one clients. So you already know my approach to life and healthy living specifically. I am a very muscle-centric person. I try to incorporate weight training to prevent the disabilities of aging. And aside from weight training and longevity, nutrition is so important for longevity and preventing lifestyle-caused chronic diseases. So I do not recommend any fad diets to people. I do not encourage restrictive eating or cutting things out. I encourage adding good things in. So starting with protein, the reason why it's important is for several reasons. Louie's getting playful down there, of course, once we start this live. But protein helps you be fuller for longer, slows down the absorption of carbohydrates when they're eaten together. It requires higher amounts of energy from your body to digest versus carbs and fats. It aids in fat burn, increases metabolism, preserves muscle mass during a caloric deficit, which I know a lot of people are not only trying to put on muscle, but to lose body fat. And then finally, promotes muscle growth. And that last reason is really the biggest push on why I recommend the quantities that I recommend, which what are those, you might ask? I really encourage at least 30 grams at each meal and try to get 3 to 5 meals per day of that amount. And the reason why that is so specific is because of the amino acids that are found in proteins, specifically animal proteins that have high leucine. And when you get that dose of about 3 grams of leucine in about 30 grams of protein, it does stimulate muscle protein synthesis. So that's the baseline that I recommend is the 30 grams per meal, 3 to 5 meals per day, especially at breakfast. An even more precise target is to take your body weight or your ideal lean body weight and to match 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight. And that can be a really high number for people, especially if you're just starting. And I think a lot of the questions that we're going to get are, how the heck do I hit that number? How do I measure that number? These are very types of common questions.
Denise says, feel free to share her story if that's appropriate at some point.
Okay. Denise has recently, thank you, Denise, for sharing. I have so many clients that are willing to share their experiences to help others. And Denise recently she's gone through some health stuff, and she's recently had some hunger that she couldn't satiate. And she's been telling me her weight's been creeping up. And I asked her, like, what does your protein look like? We've been working together for a long time. And as you work together, things ebb and flow where you might focus on one thing and something else shifts. Well, she took a second look at her protein, and it definitely did the trick for her, where she's no longer getting up at midnight and eating apples. True story, that's what she was doing. So, just a couple of days and you can feel the benefits of it. So that was really exciting to actually have Denise feel that after testing it and reapplying it.
Sorry to interrupt. I'm going to try to get some of these quick comments as you're talking.
Sure.
Thomas says looking for recommendations on resistance bands. If you want to quickly just talk about the bands for 2 seconds.
Okay, resistance bands. I do recommend these, and I still use the Undersun Fitness bands, which we have a link for. They're on Amazon. They come in a 5-piece kit, and they're about $59. I do recommend getting a pair of full-fingered gloves to use with them, because you will be able to lift a lot more comfortably and a lot heavier. They're a great set of bands. I'm sure there's other ones out there, but Undersun is the only one that I've tried and that I can put my name out for.
Rebecca has a quick question. So ideal is measured against target weight and not current weight?
Yeah, and that depends. Different experts will say different things. You'll hear people say both. So if your current weight is high and it's just an astronomical number, you might want to start with working your way up with what your ideal weight is and start there. Now, other experts say that if you are overweight, then you need protein, even more protein. So that's why some people say the more the better if you do have a lot of weight to lose. Other situations that might cause for higher intake is if you're aging, older, you're more athletic. And I think a lot of us fit those two things right there. So I would say somewhere between your current weight and your ideal weight would be an appropriate place to target. Okay, some more facts just to get us going and to get these thoughts rumbling in your mind. So we talked about how much you need. Quality sources is a big deal to me, because the biggest thing that's killing Americans is ultra-processed foods and not enough good foods. So good foods being plants, plenty of vegetables, plenty of fruits, and plenty of whole food, animal-sourced proteins. So quality proteins would be things that are things like chicken, fish, beef, lamb, just in their natural state. Less quality sources would be those that are processed. So things like chicken nuggets or hot dogs or Slim Jims, processed vegan meats that are convenient.
Chris has something against gas station hot dogs.
I do. I personally do not like it when people waste an experience meal on a gas station hot dog. I think that is ludicrous. Other things on quality sources. Quality sources will have a lot of amino acids in them, and they are readily available to absorb in your body. And then another thing about quality protein is you want it to be coming from a food source where that food mostly gives you calories in protein and not a lot of baggage calories in carbs and fats. So what I mean by that is a good example is peanut butter, which sometimes people mistake for a protein, even though it's technically a fatty food. You get way more calories from fat along with the 9 grams of protein that you might get. So sometimes protein comes just by itself in the form of a chicken breast, or sometimes protein comes in the form of carbohydrates in legumes or fat in nut butters, things like that. And not to say that there's anything wrong with those, especially if you are 100% plant-based, then you might need to rely more on those sources. But it just becomes a little bit harder to manage your calories and your overall starchy carbs intake with those sources.
Carol Collette is wondering about protein sources that are high in leucine.
Yeah. So
Speaking of
leucine,
amino acids,
the number one sources of leucine are animal-based meats. And that is why I am pro animal protein. I know that a lot of people don't eat animal protein, and about 10% of people are claiming to be some sort of vegetarian. So I do have a little list of some sources that are higher in leucine for plant-based products. Now, keep in mind, there are tons of protein in plant proteins that aren't higher in leucine. So leucine specific, which is a very great question, Carol. First of all, you're going to start with dairy, which I understand that's not a true plant. It's still animal-based. But a lot of people do still eat dairy. So I'm talking about things like whey protein powder or Greek yogurt or cottage cheese or regular cheese. If you want to completely stay away from animals and have non-meat sources, then you might be looking at your tempeh, your tofu, your soy-based products. Legumes are excellent. So your lentils, black beans, chickpeas. And I would say the best protein powder that's non-dairy, I would go with pea protein. And try to stay away from the hemp protein because that has less readily absorbable protein.
Lenise just asked a question like right on the dot on that. She wants to know thoughts on protein powder. She uses a vegetarian one by Arbonne, but what do you recommend?
That's a great question. Okay, so protein powder. First of all, I do encourage people to always get their nutrients from whole foods, such as real food. Protein powder supplements are exactly that. They are a supplement. If you really struggle to hit your protein goals, especially if you are strictly plant-based, then it might be more appropriate for you to have protein powder every single day. So starting with meat eaters and whey, I think whey is the number one variety just because of the amino acid profile in it. So whey absorbs very quickly, and it has all of the amino acids that help build muscle. When you're looking for a protein powder, it's really important to flip it around, look at the ingredients, because there's a ton of protein powders that are filled with garbage. So you want the list of ingredients to be short, recognizable, and it's going to be somewhat processed because it is a processed food. So there are going to be some things in there. The other thing you want to look at is the nutrition info itself. And most whey protein powders will deliver about 20 to 25 grams of protein per serving. And that will equate to about 100 to 125 calories per serving. So also look at the grams of fat. They should fall somewhere between 1 to 2 grams. And the grams of carbs should fall somewhere between 1 to 2 grams of carbs. If you're looking at a protein powder that you want just protein, that's what you should look for. And this is easily confused with meal replacement shakes, which are very prevalent on the market, especially with a lot of big name companies. Meal replacement shakes will often have a little bit lower protein content, and they'll also have higher carbs and fats in them, including a lot more refined fillers and processed junk fillers. So your calories will be higher. And you have the carbs and the fats, which you can't control. So what I like about just a pure protein source is you can make that any way you want it. You can put oats into it. Like, for example, every morning, Aaron puts oats into his shaker cup. He shakes it up. He adds his carbs into it. You can add a little bit of nut butter. You can dial up your fats and your carbs exactly what you want them to be. I personally, if I'm going to have a protein shake, I'll usually have like a piece of fruit on the side or a rice cake on the side, something where I can dial up and down that carb level depending on what my needs are for that day. If you are going to go with a vegan protein powder, again, I recommend the pea protein first. And then I really also like the rice protein. And if you are looking at those, same rules apply where you want to look at the ingredients, you want to look at the nutrition info, and you also want to look for products that show the amino acid profile. And that's really important on the vegan versions. I'm trying to think if I'm missing anything on those. Oh, yes, I am. So as I mentioned, you'll likely find each serving will provide 20 to 25 grams of protein per serving. So you need to keep that in mind in order to hit that 30-gram threshold. If that's something that you're really trying to do, you might need to do a scoop and a quarter or a scoop and a half and do extra servings in order to get that bump. And I always use a scale for protein powder because it does pack down with weight. And one scoop, you could measure it 13 times and get 13 different results on your readings. So that is one of the things that I have, okay, in order to hit my 30 grams, I need 45 grams of the powder or whatever it equals out to. And I use my scale. And I use my scale not to track macros every day. I don't do that, but I just do it to make sure I'm not getting way over or way under in regards to what I think I'm getting. And it just helps me manage my portions that way.
Let's see here. Quick question from Heidi. She wants to know thoughts on sourdough starter and recipes for adding in protein.
Oh, that is way out of my realm. First of all, sourdough starters. I would love it if somebody would mail me some of those. I love sourdough. I don't know anything about making them. I don't know anything about adding protein to them. So
if anybody that is on the chat here knows about it, type it in and fill it in. I'm sure somebody out there, maybe Molly. Maybe
Rebecca or Kathy. Those three are my top whole food plant-based. They love to cook in the kitchen and they're always amazing me with their creations. So.
Yeah, we'll come back to that if it comes back up. But one more question from Shelly. She wants to know about pork as a source of protein.
Pork is an excellent source of protein. And one thing that I didn't mention on the quality scale of animal protein, you know, the gold label of all animal source proteins is pasture raised. So if you can have animals that are out grazing the earth and eating grass and eating a variety of different plants, those are all upcycled into the animal, which then is more healthy for you. So if your budget allows and if your location offers, try to seek those out. You know, if you can't afford them or you can't find them, don't sweat, do what you can and make the best choices based off what you have to work with.
Maybe you want to share what we're thinking about doing.
Okay, so I've been doing, I'm constantly learning, constantly researching, and I want us to always eat as healthily as we can. And so I'm trying to make an effort to support local ranchers. And I found a really great website. I'll link it in the show notes once we do this, but it actually shows you pasture-raised products in America. It's especially hard for nomads because I don't just have my local CSA that I can support, or I don't have my local rancher that I can have reoccurring orders with. So I want to find a place, and I found one about 2 hours from us, and I want to do a big order on pasture-raised items such as chicken, beef, lamb, pork, eggs. And some of you might know that we still have a Dometic CFX cooler in our truck. We had that in there while we lived in our tent in our truck. And it's still there for excursions. We have a lot of drinks in there. We carry alcohol beverages. We carry non-alcoholic beverages. It's like our overflow for our regular refrigerator.
You put eggs and yogurt and
things that we need to stock up on. So I said, Aaron, let's take all that out. Let's turn it into additional freezer and let's stock up on some really high quality protein the next time we're through an area that offers it. Because it's just the next step. You know, I talk a lot about turning up the nutritional dial. So if you're hearing this and you're like, whoa, I just need to start with the basics. I just want to start to add in more chicken, whatever. That's great. Start with that. Start with where you are and dial it up a little bit. I feel like Aaron and I are at the part where I need to do it a little bit more responsibly and really just supporting the farmers out there and feeling really good about what we're putting in our body. So,
well, it's as we travel, we don't always have the same grocery stores to go to. So you find yourselves, being in a new place that you have no idea what that grocery store is going to offer.
Yeah,
so this would just give us a little bit more control over what we have on board.
Right. So our freezer is almost empty right now, which is great because then we'll have the capacity to put in an order, and it won't last us terribly long just because of the amount that we consume. But if I can add that in more and more, it just drives out the bad more and more. So that's something that we're doing coming up, and I'm really excited about it.
Yeah. So if anybody does that type of, what do you call it, where you order like from a local butcher, sometimes you can get a quarter, half
cow.
Yeah. I know sometimes that happened.
I was just looking at what a half cow, I think a half cow was 200 to 225 pounds of meat, and it required a 7 to 8 square foot fridge. And those that are in an RV, that's crazy. Or a freezer, a freezer. So in the Airstream, our refrigerator was 3 cubic feet, and currently we have 10 cubic feet. So if we were to purchase half a cow, that would be 8/10 of our refrigerator space, which obviously isn't happening.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Carmen wants to know what your process is for measuring and storing proteins that you've cooked.
That I've cooked. Okay. So, I did get a question on our Facebook group page about protein that I want to bring up now. The question was, do you look at the nutrition info while it's raw, or do you look at the nutrition info while it's cooked? And that's really important because that kind of prefaces this. So you always want to look at your nutrition information based on the raw weight. And what happens, to give an example, if you were to cook some chicken or some ground beef or whatever it is, 4 ounces raw has a lot of moisture in it. So when you cook it, it dries out and it evaporates. It literally turns into about 3 ounces, give or take, depending on the meat and depending on how much you cook it. If you're like eating it rare versus medium, well done, that all makes a big difference. So you always want to pay attention to the raw weight. So when I'm doing food prep for pre-cooked proteins, I will pay attention to the raw weight and what I'm putting into that batch. So for the purpose of bulk prepping, let's say I'm cooking 3 pounds of taco meat. I will put that into my pan, I'll cook it up, and then after it's done cooking, then I'll divide it into the number of portions that I want to portion it out into. And that number of portions is going to depend on, what your goals are. But I typically find that 6 ounces raw weight of protein will give me that 30 gram minimum. So let's just say 3 pounds is 16 times 3. What's that, Aaron? 32 plus 16. 48? So 48 total raw weight beef divided by 6 ounces is, what's that? That's your number of servings that you can portion it into.
I feel like that's a complicated subject that like a video might help actually show you measuring it and
we should do a video.
It.
Okay, let's break that down. Okay, you have 16 ounces per pound times 3 pounds is 48 ounces. And I want to get 6 ounce servings out of that. So if I divide that by 6, that means I'll get 8 servings of 6 ounce portions.
So you're not concerned with what it weighs after you've cooked it?
I am. So at that point, I'll take my skillet, I'll put it on my scale, I'll deduct the weight of my pan, which I have in my tare, and then I'll divide it by 8. And then I'll take that amount and I'll put it into portion cups. And it seems a little tedious at that first prep session, which it is. But once you have your 8 portion cups for the week, you don't have to think about it. Every time you go to grab something, you have 8 meals that are brain damage free. And that's why it's worth taking that extra 5 minutes to go through the math on it. And like I said, sometimes it's not about, tracking your numbers. It's not always about tracking your calories or tracking your protein grams. It's about, okay, I'm meal planning. I have this amount of fresh meat in the fridge and I need it to last me X amount of days. So portioning also helps you meal prep. It helps you plan ahead. It helps make sure that you have enough to last throughout the week. And if you're just like eating whatever you want, you might run out 3 days early, and then you might reach for something convenient. So it's all part of a purpose and part of being prepared. So if you have more questions on that portion step, let me know. Otherwise, if it's something that's super simple, like for dinner, Erin and I, a good example is we might throw 1 pound of chicken on the grill. In that case, I do it much, much easier. When that cooked chicken comes in, I split it in half. Half of it goes to Erin, and the other half, I'll either eat the whole thing or I'll eat half of it. It all depends on what else I've eaten that day. But I'll eyeball it at certain points, especially at this point in my relationship with food and measuring food. And especially if it's just a single meal where, I might be off a little bit on one meal. It's a lot different than food prepping for a week where I want it to be good for 7 days.
Okay. Quick question from, I love this name. The name is kind of new here, and she might have missed it in the beginning, but if you could go back over, how does she figure out how much protein is needed for muscle gain?
Okay. For muscle gain, first of all, calories really matter. So anytime you want to gain mass, you want to be in a surplus, and that includes muscle. Anytime you want to maintain, you kind of just want to balance. Don't be at a surplus. Don't be at a deficit on your calories. And if you want to lose fat or lose weight in general, you want to be in a deficit. So to put on muscle mass, you want to be in a little bit of a surplus. And on the protein scale, their new research says anywhere from 0.8 grams per pound of body weight all the way up to 1.4 I've seen. So I like to say 1.0 just for simplicity, and just because you really only need that really high end if you're really, really getting after it. So I would say 1.0, 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight.
Is that targeted body weight?
It's ideal weight.
Ideal targeted body weight.
Yeah, ideal weight. Yep. So, okay. I mean, maybe your ideal lean mass is to put on 10 pounds. So that would mean your number is higher than what you currently weigh. Your protein intake would reflect that higher number then. So it can go both ways.
How about for someone kind of just maintaining, they'd still want the 1 pound per, or 1 gram per pound of body weight?
Yeah.
Is a good goal to shoot for?
That's a great goal to shoot for, yes.
So if I weigh 175 pounds, I want to shoot for 175 grams of protein per day.
If you want to maintain. Yep. Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. A lot of people are commenting about the helping the farmers. Heidi says, my daughter is a farmer and has chickens and beef that are grass fed. So they'll stock up when they make it to Minnesota. We're also from Minnesota, by the way.
You should send us her information so we can plan ahead and come to Minnesota with an empty freezer.
Yes. Molly's talking more about the sourdough bread. It does have more protein, but she doesn't quite know the science behind it. She bakes with whole grain flour.
You knew Molly would be in on that one.
Yes. Chuck's an expert on sourdough baker. Let's see.
Talking about the refrigerator space.
Yes.
I know a lot of the questions, I got other questions online about when I prep, do I put a lot of prepped meat into the freezer with it being pre-cooked? And my answer is no. Not to say you shouldn't, but I really like to just keep raw meat in the freezer, and I put pre-cooked meat in the refrigerator. And, the thing with cooked meat is it dries out, and frozen meat also doesn't taste as good as fresh meat. And when you combine the two, you might end up with a less desirable taste and texture. So if you do need to put pre-cooked meat in the freezer, if you're finding it's kind of dried out and gross, I'd recommend trying to find something that is like in a marinara sauce or something to help keep it moist and prevent it from freezer burn. So that's about the only advice I can give on that question. But I generally like to keep pre-cooked meat in the refrigerator, and then I really like to prep my meat for the freezer, but I do that to the point of portioning it into individual portion-sized bags. So it's ready to cook without doing any trimming, without doing any weighing to find out how much is in it. I can just take it straight from that Ziploc bag to preparing it, and I don't have to dirty up any appliances, or I don't have to handle raw meat.
Yeah, that was kind of in the last video that we just did. So
that was, yeah.
Hopefully that helped to show that.
And I really like doing that, not only for controlling my portions, it speeds up your meals. It allows you to buy in bulk. And I waste very, very little because I'm literally putting in the fridge for the next day. I'm really looking at my refrigerator day by day. Before I go to bed, do I have enough food for tomorrow? And if I don't, I'll pull something from the freezer and it will unthaw overnight.
Darlene wants to know how long you keep pre-cooked meat in the refrigerator.
Pre-cooked food in general, I will go a full 7 days. So if I cook something on Monday, I'll eat it up until Sunday night. And that's, I know, a personal preference. Like, I'm not concerned at all about the safety of it. I've never once gotten sick. I've been eating 1 week food basically my entire life.
I would prefer 1 day.
Aaron does not like that.
And that's like, I'm kind of spoiled because Chris loves to cook, and so she does a lot of, fresh cooking, but 1 day leftovers. I just don't like leftovers. I never did as a kid, and that's tough for some people.
Yeah, and I know some people are more middle of the road, like maybe every 3 days. So sometimes you might food prep twice a week. You might do your grocery shopping and food prepping twice a week. Another good way to do it is just a rolling prep where, every few nights you might do an extra triple batch on dinner and just give you enough prepped food to last you the next couple days. And that way you really don't have to think much about it. Just every few days you do it. But I personally will do up to a week.
That's a lot.
What are you giggling at? Did you find something? Somebody making fun of me?
Jen said 1 day leftovers. She thought
yeah. Aaron likes leftovers on day 0 when they're fresh.
Yes. What did I just miss here? Heidi wants to know, is there a good place to find out how much protein there is in animal meat prior to cooking, and then how much after cooking? Does that change the protein?
Oh, okay. So yeah, that's a great question. So I'm going to answer this in 2 different things. First of all, when you're looking at the protein content in different animal proteins, you always want to look at the ingredients label for that specific product, if it's on there. So the reason is different leannesses have different protein contents. So if you're looking at 4 ounces of 70% lean ground beef versus 4 ounces of 99% lean ground beef, you're going to have a lot more fat in that 4 ounces of the 70%. So as the fat takes volume, the protein goes down. So you're going to have less protein in that. You're going to have higher protein in the more lean meats. So you always want to verify what cut of meat are you working with and know what that cut is. But I think what Heidi is asking is there an easy conversion for how to take cooked food and estimate what the raw portion might be for that food? And there's a general average. On average, it's about 75%. You lose about 25% of the weight. So if you cook 4 ounces of meat, it might weigh 3 ounces while it's cooked. So 0.75 ounce of a cooked chicken thigh might equal 1 ounce of a cooked chicken thigh. But that's not always the case, because some people cook their food more. Some people like their chicken really, really dried out and shriveled up and really seared. I like mine a little bit more juicy and tender. So our ratios are going to be different.
That's why we eat a lot of chicken thighs, because I can cook those a little extra on the grill and they're still juicy. But if you do that with chicken breast, it's not the same.
I can't handle it.
It dries out. So
yeah.
That's a good mix for us.
Yeah. So I would say typically you'll find to take your cooked weight, and it is, how do I word this? 0.75 is your cooked, 1 is your raw. Does that make sense?
Yes, totally.
But you might want to take your own averages, play around, take your averages, write down what it is raw, write down what it is cooked, and do the math on it and see what your personal cooking is, because that's kind of how I find mine.
All right. Mark says he really enjoys your weightlifting reels on Facebook. So
nice.
That's good to get a little props on doing those. It does take a lot of time to like record, especially things just like our daily workouts. It's a lot of extra steps to just sit and record it.
Because we just want to get right into the workout. Like we want to work out. We're not there to film.
Yeah.
We've actually had to put a system in place where I say, okay, Aaron, will you take shots of me? Do you either want to do it before our workout or after the workout? We never do it during the actual workout. It's either a preview or a review at the end, because we're there to focus, and you need to focus on those workouts, and you need to be mindful of them and be intentful with your workouts. But I'm glad to hear you like it.
Rebecca says for whole food, plant-based, we try to cook our lentils for the week, which allows us to throw beluga lentils in anything that needs a protein boost, like oatmeal.
Yeah. That's a great tip. Lentils.
Kathy says if you need to freeze meat that is cooked, you can undercook it a bit and then cook the rest of it when you're ready to eat it. That helps preserve some of the flavor.
That's a good tip too.
And texture.
Yeah, that's a good tip. When I used to do bulk prep pre-cooked meat, and I used to be a little bit on the underside because I knew that I would, be putting it right back into that skillet again. I did that in the van, actually. Just make sure you don't grab it and eat it cold when it's not re-nuked.
Okay, Lenice says ideas for lunch. What simple items would my husband be able to put together? We aren't eating lunch at the same time, and I would like him to make his own healthy lunch.
Well, that's okay. So that's where you're going to want to have some pre-cooked carbs. And carbs are different for every person. We'll get into another video on that too. So
you could use me as an example.
So carbs, if you have a metabolically fit animal machine like Aaron, he can eat 2 servings of quinoa at lunch every single day. So I like to have big batches of pre-cooked starchy carbs, whether it's brown rice, quinoa, white rice. If you don't fall into that category where you can't have starchy carbs at lunch, maybe it's having pre-cooked broccoli or some spaghetti squash or more of your carbs from vegetables rather than carbs from grains and things like that. But have that planned ahead. And then have your fibrous vegetables also so that they're ready to put into the air fryer. And then also have a plan for meat. So on this food prep video I recently did, I talked about having your foods prepped by categories: carbs, vegetables, and protein sources. And when you have those 3 components figured out, it's very easy to put your meals together. So what I do for Aaron is I'll take his pre-cooked starchy carb and I'll put it on a plate in the microwave. And then I take his fibrous vegetables and I fill it into the air fryer basket raw. And then I take my pre-portioned meat and I will put it on a little parchment paper. I'll season it up, and he can grill that when he's ready to have lunch. So as soon as he puts that chicken on the grill, he puts 7 minutes on the air fryer and 2 minutes on the microwave, and everything comes together at the same time. And, you can adjust that where maybe cooking fresh protein is too much. That's where you do want to have that prepped protein available. So if you don't want to get the grill out, if you don't want to spend 15 minutes on lunch, then you have pre-cooked versions that you reheat. So that version of lunch that I just said, it takes about 12 minutes to grill the chicken or whatever it might be. And it takes 7 minutes in the air fryer. So 15-minute lunch for hot, fresh food.
She wanted to know what her husband could do on her own. That was a lot of Chris doing a lot for me. I'm kidding.
I'm brainwashed, aren't I? Okay.
I'm kidding, but it's the exact same thing.
Have some pre-cooked meat in a container or protein source, whatever that might be. Mm-hmm. Have some pre-cooked carbs in a container and have some pre-cooked vegetables in a container. If you want it all to be pre-cooked, you got to food prep.
I think that last food prep video was spot on, because without that, so let's just say Chris was gone And if those things weren't pre-prepped, I would probably resort to something easier. Like some of us are just like that, where we don't enjoy cooking as much. We don't enjoy food prep as much.
You would have a peanut butter sandwich on Ezekiel bread.
Yeah, it would be a lot harder. But because there's, fresh raw chicken in the refrigerator that's thawing out from last night, and there's
it's already portioned out. You don't have to do anything to it.
There's always vegetables, and there's usually some type of carb, rice or quinoa. But even if the rice and quinoa wasn't made, I would just grill up the chicken and put the broccoli in the air fryer and cook it up, or green beans or whatever it was.
Air fryer is great. And I do think that people who aren't capable of, if you're trying to get people to do their own food, which I totally understand, I've had my moments where I say to Aaron, it's this or a peanut butter sandwich. The air fryer is a great tool to get them to put their vegetables in there, put it on for 7 minutes, salt and pepper, a little bit of seasoning, and it's hot and delicious. Hopefully that helped.
Kathy wants to know about a substitute for bread, using lettuce in place of it for reduction of carbs.
What's this question on what kind of lettuce is the best?
Can you use lettuce in place of like bread? Like a lettuce wrap?
Oh, sure. Yeah, you can cut out bread anytime. Lettuce wraps are really fun. I think that putting things in a lettuce wrap, it gives you that satisfaction that like you're eating with your hands, like tacos in a lettuce wrap, or there's the lettuce wraps at Asian restaurants where it'll have like the delicious chicken and water chestnuts and all that. I think lettuce wraps are a really fun way to still enjoy your handhelds while bringing the carbs in. And, talking a little bit about carbs, I think that that's a great thing to do. If you are watching your carbs, I highly recommend cutting out breads and pastas and saving your carb allotment for more nutrient dense foods. So things like potatoes, things like root vegetables, things like quinoa, those are going to be more nutrient dense than breads and pasta. And it's not that you can't have breads or pastas, but sometimes if you replace them with more nutrient dense vegetables and stuff, you'll start that you feel a lot better and you turn that nutritional dial.
Rick is asking about eating raw veggies in the meal. Is that the same as cooked? And I like to do that as well. I eat a lot of raw veggies instead of cooking them, just because I like them. But is it the same as cooking them, or is cooking actually worse for your veggies?
So from a nutrient standpoint, raw vegetables, eating raw is so healthy. I think it's usually the opposite, where people don't like raw as much as cooked. I would say eat what you like. There's certain vegetables that I really love raw, like grape tomatoes, cherry tomatoes, sweet bell peppers, cucumbers, snap pea pods. I really love those raw. Even green beans and broccoli, once in a while I'll eat raw, but some people really struggle to even eat vegetables at all. So they might need to cook them up. They might need to add a little bit of fat to them. They might need to add a little bit of acid to them, add some vinegar, add some salt. Like, you might need to play around and find what veggies you like. I would recommend staying away from boiling. Boiling can leach out the nutrients more so than cooking them in the oven or roasting them in the air fryer. So raw is great. I would say that everybody could benefit from eating more plants. So however you can get them into your diet, that's the best way to eat them, especially if it means you'll keep eating them.
For sure. Let's see. Kathy's talking about romaine and butter lettuce wraps. She likes those.
Yeah, those are the two best.
And kind of new here, says low carb tortillas. A lot of people like to use those.
Yeah, the thing I don't like about low carb tortillas is, they have a lot of fillers in them. They have a lot of processed ingredients in them. Be careful about that. I mean, on that one, you have to choose your battle. Are you really trying to count your carbs and take a lot of fiber in and watch net carbs? Or, I personally would have a real homemade sourdough piece of bread than a low carb tortilla, but that's just me. Also, when you are looking at low carb products, don't be fooled by the things like net carbs. You really still need to look at the overall calories and the overall amount of carbs, because you're still consuming that. So always pay attention to calories, always pay attention to the full amount of carbs, and always read the ingredients. And if you're looking at some of these low carb products, that have a crazy processed list of ingredients, you might want to consider looking for something else. And I'm not saying you can't have them, but just start to pay attention to that.
I think that gets us caught up on the questions if you want to.
Oh, great.
Continue.
Let's see if I have any other questions. Okay, I do. Any ideas on adding protein to my plain diet would be helpful. I can't do many sauces, nothing spicy, no eggs, and shouldn't have dairy. Okay, so I would say dried spices and dried herbs would be your best friends to do dry rubs. And when I say dried spices, that doesn't necessarily mean spicy. There's so many good dried spices that you can do. My absolute favorite dry rub for chicken thighs is dried cumin and dried coriander with salt and pepper. And that combination never gets old to me. If you're trying to do a sauce, which you say you can't do and you shouldn't have dairy, coconut milk makes a good substitute for heavy cream. But I would stick with those. Just stick with the basics, just do like dried spices, dried herbs, play around, fresh herbs. Fresh herbs are really where it's at.
Do you want to touch base on opinions on protein bars?
Oh, protein bars. Okay, so I did touch a little bit about protein powders. So everything I said about protein powders applies for protein bars. Protein bars are a little bit harder because there's even more fillers, there's even more refined sugars, and there's a lot more gunk in them. So it's even harder to find a good protein bar. I generally try to find protein bars that have 20 grams of protein. A lot of them out there only have like 8 to 9 grams of protein, and then the rest is carbs and fats. So look at that. Again, look at the ingredients. Protein bars are tough because they are super convenient and we eat them once in a while, especially if we're out on trails and we need some food on our hikes. We'll put those in our bag. It's not so easy to put a baggie of chicken in your hiking bag on a 100-degree day. That's kind of gross, but just read the ingredients. I don't have any specific brands that I really love because I personally haven't found one. I've been eating less and less protein bars over the years. I think I really I relied on those a lot when I first started my health journey. And the ones I do use are like Quest bars because they have that higher protein content and they have the lower fat and the lower carbs. However, I'm still not happy with the amount of ingredients in them, the amount of sugar alcohols in them. So that's the reason why I hesitate to really recommend them, because I really haven't found my perfect bar yet.
I think that's a good point to talk about the protein level on the protein bars, because if you do look at the back of the labels, there is a lot of them that are half of what the next protein bar might be. So it's less of a protein bar, it's more of a refined
candy bar.
Sugar
candy bar. Yeah, it's really not a healthy choice at all.
Yeah, they taste good, and
of course they taste great. They taste great.
Yeah, I think that higher 20 plus grams of protein.
Yeah, so
limits.
I would try to find something with 20 grams of protein. Try to find something with 10 grams of fat or less. Try to find something with low sugar. And that's going to be the challenging part, because as soon as you find products with low sugar, they have sugar alcohols in them or artificial sugars. And, then it's one of those things, well, like, what's more important to you?
Okay, Shelly wants to know whole eggs or egg whites, which is the bigger bang for your buck?
Well, okay, eggs. Eggs, if you're having eggs for breakfast, each egg has 6 grams of protein. So if you wanted to hit 30 grams of protein, that's 5 eggs, which fat-wise, I can't remember the exact amount of fat. It's been so long, but I think it's like 5 grams of fat per egg. So that's also like 30 grams of fat right there. So what I like to do is take 2 eggs, you get all the flavor, and then you can add additional whites to it, or you can add an additional protein source with it. So you could add lentils to a couple of eggs. You could add some taco meat to a couple of eggs. That's personally what I do, is I like to take like 4 ounces of meat and I add a couple of eggs to it just so it feels like breakfast. If you really like the egg whites, I would recommend getting it in the cartons, but make sure that the ingredients say 100% egg whites and that it doesn't have fake egg whites in it. Something to touch on with eggs, I know they've been vilified in the past, but a lot of people don't know in 2015, the American Heart Association actually removed that rule that you shouldn't eat eggs and red meat, because recent studies are now showing that eating cholesterol foods does not raise your cholesterol. Now, the American Heart Association did not announce this to the public because they probably don't want to admit that they've been giving bad advice for 30 years. But that's just one of the things about nutritional science is not all science is equal. There's a lot of debates. It's very political. I think we all know that there's a lot of conflicting information. But I would say do not be afraid of eating whole eggs, especially if you're just having a couple of whole eggs a day. Of course, I am not an expert in cholesterol or anything like that, so always seek your doctor for medical specifics. But I think it's good to know that a lot of the rules and research on saturated fats and dietary cholesterol are changing. And they're saying now that the cholesterol is rising and heart disease is rising as a result of refined flours, sugars, starchy carbs. And those are really the things that we should be paying attention to.
You caught me in the middle of typing something. Tina says she likes watching your spice combos, and maybe that would be a good idea for a new video to talk about your spice mixtures. And since we do a lot of dry rubs and spices and herbs and things like that.
That's a good suggestion. And I will say that one I just shared about the cumin and coriander, that is unreleased. That is like my number one, and I've never published a recipe on it. I don't know why. It's my favorite. So just to repeat it, I'll take, usually chicken thighs are the best, and I'll sprinkle it with salt, pepper, dried cumin, and dried coriander. And then I'll, drizzle it with a little oil, get it to stick on there, and I'll cook that up, and I absolutely love it. And I really love coriander in general. I think it's really bright, floral. I think it's one of those spices that is underrated, and it should get more attention.
This next question, I think we should actually do a video on this, because I think this is the number one question that everybody always talks about.
Okay.
And Jen wants to know, her hardest meal to get 30 grams of protein in is breakfast. What do you suggest? And everybody always wants to know what you eat for breakfast.
Let's talk about why breakfast is the most important. When you break your fast, when you have high protein breakfast, and maybe your breakfast isn't early, whatever your meal number one is, you're setting the tone on your metabolism and the way that your body is working the rest of the day. If you start your breakfast with a sad, standard American diet, like muffin and orange juice, that is going to set you up for a roller coaster of insulin and cravings the rest of the day. And maybe you don't feel it right away. Maybe it doesn't hit you till 9 p.m. when you sit on the couch. But if you can change one thing, or if you can work one meal to have that high protein dose, it should be meal number one. And the way that I do that is I treat it like any other meal. And I have things like beef taco, I have chicken, I have pork patties, I have turkey patties. My breakfast sausages are always pre-cooked in my fridge. And I talked about this on that food prep video too, where I have a couple recipes that I make my own homemade turkey patty sausages or pork patty sausages using real meat and real dried spices. I do not rely on processed meats. Processed meats are not a healthy approach to this. You really want to get whole food meat sources and cook it yourself. So I do a big triple batch of these sausages, and I find 6 ounces of raw weight meat will get me to that portion that I need. So I will cook that up. I'll make sure it's in my fridge. So for example, if I eat my last of the patties this morning, if I had my very last patty tonight, before I go to bed, I'm going to cook it up and make sure it's there for me in the morning, because I don't want to be cooking meat at 6 in the morning or 7 in the morning. Nobody wants to do that. So that's really a meal where I recommend having pre-cooked meat. And don't be afraid to have some cherry tomatoes, have some sauteed onions and bell peppers with it, throw an egg on top for that breakfast feel, and eventually you get used to it. If you really, really struggle with that, that's a case where I would say maybe you are that person that needs to just take a protein powder supplement shot of 30 grams of protein in the morning to help you get that boost to start your day. And that's what Aaron does. Aaron has his shaker cup. He puts in his whey protein. He fills some oatmeal in there. I have my leftovers that I like, and he, as you've all learned, he does not like leftovers. So he won't touch that, but he will have a big shaker cup full, and it's super quick. And we are eating breakfast and done in minutes. 5 minutes, breakfast is served.
Yeah, and that's kind of meal number one. And, we take Louie for a big walk every morning, and
we usually walk like 4 miles after that.
Yeah, an hour to an hour and a half or whatever it takes. And, I like to eat beforehand. Actually, you got me. I used to, everybody kind of eats on different cycles and everybody's body's a little different. I used to not like to eat right away in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
But she kind of got me eating more spaced out, consistent meals.
It's really important to schedule your meal times.
Mm-hmm. So that's breakfast number one for me. And then when we get back, we usually work out right away.
Do our weight training after that.
Mm-hmm. And then we'll have more of
Then we have breakfast number 2.
A real breakfast, which is...
That's where Aaron gets his 5 eggs scrambled up.
Mm-hmm.
And I usually do... It depends on if we're boondocking or if we're primitive, like off-grid or at an RV park. So if we're at an RV park and we're plugged in and I'm really hammering on my air fryer all day long, then I'll make him roasted potatoes to go with his eggs. If we are boondocking and we are a little more mindful of our battery usage, then I'll take corn tortillas and I toast them up, and he'll have corn tortillas as his carb. So he has his scrambled eggs and his tortillas, and I have more of my normal food.
So lots of people loving the breakfast ideas and the sausages.
I tell you, those sausages, they change people. They really change people. And I think that putting them in those patties, it's the key for grab and go. It's really the key for grab and go. And it's really hard to put protein sources together. So what I mean is, yeah, I could recommend have some cottage cheese or have some Greek yogurt or have this or have that, but then you're piecing stuff and you're still having a void. And I think people really get burnt out on trying to hit that 30 grams. And if you're trying to add up small arbitrary numbers of, I'm getting 4 grams from this piece of bread and I'm getting, 9 grams from this yogurt, you're going to burn out. So I just say have 6 ounces of chicken and move on. It's a lot easier. Have 6 ounces of turkey, done. Have a little breakfast patty out of the way.
Video idea on how to create a workout while in the RV. If using equipment, show form and maybe what muscles are being used.
That is a loaded suggestion. There's a lot in that one, and I agree. How to create your own workouts.
Yeah, we've kind of, so we started this channel, Healthy RV Living, and we want to put out as much content and, free information as we can. But it's a lot to... We kind of struggled on exactly what do we put out?
What do people respond? What do people need?
Yeah. And part of it is that's tough is, the views. And this is kind of why we separated Irene Iron Travels from Healthy RV Living, is because the views for healthy living is just not the same as the RV living. So, it's the same amount of work and the same amount of time for us to do the videos, but they just don't perform as well. And so we're still trying to figure out the best balance. And basically we're just taking it slow so we don't get burnt out. And, we kind of continue to do both channels. So Rick wanted to know about if yogurt and fruit is a good option for breakfast, because that's kind of a common one that people eat.
I would say it would be really good if you had a 4-ounce turkey patty on the side with it. Yogurt and fruit. If you're going to have a serving of yogurt, if you're having a serving of Greek yogurt, plain, that might bring in 15 to 20 grams of protein, depending on your brand and your serving size. I would say you still need a little bit more than that. try to do a little bit of patty and add it to it.
Mary wanted to say she's retired from the AHA, and they are known for changing their stance in nutrition and exercise advice as new research comes to light.
Excellent.
So she just kind of wanted to put that out there.
That's good. Thank you for sharing that. What's her name?
Mary.
Mary. Thank you, Mary. Yeah, I think that part of the struggle is, as a country, especially like medically, all of our hospitals, everything is so industrialized. It's really hard to push out announcements and changes. And how do people learn about it, right? Unless you're actively seeking out knowledge. And even if you are, there's so much conflicting information. It's really hard. So that's good to hear.
Let's see. Kathy called us hobbits because we eat first breakfast, second breakfast.
Well, we eat 4 meals a day. And so I don't know.
That's a joke from The Hobbit, which
I don't like.
Chris has not seen that.
I don't know that movie. I tend to stay away from sci-fis and wizardry movies. I do recommend scheduling your meals. I do recommend about every 4 hours is, for me, that's what I personally like. And that's what I recommend for people that are trying to schedule their meals. Where do they start? And every 4 hours is a good amount, since we're on the topic of protein. That 30 gram per protein, this is a good thing to talk about. You really do want to space that out and give it to yourself in little ballasts. So 30 grams every 4 hours, maybe every 3 hours, depending on your eating window. But you're not going to get the same benefit. Like, let's say meal number 1, you have 60 grams of protein. That's not as beneficial as having 30 grams here and 30 grams there. So while you could front load a little bit, and I do recommend having higher in the morning, but don't expect to just put down, 4 servings of protein shake and say, oh, I just killed, a big chunk of my protein goal. Really, the benefit of the 30 gram dosing is getting those kicks of leucine into your muscles so that you can stimulate that protein synthesis, and doing it in that amount spaced throughout the day is the most beneficial.
Well, we're coming up just on an hour. Do you want to finish any final thoughts on the protein subject? Anything that you missed or you want to finish up with? We appreciate everybody joining in. There's over 50 people on here.
Oh, that's awesome. Thanks so much for joining.
Chris goes, there's going to be about 6 people. 6 people are going to watch.
I said 6. I would say, if you're struggling to hit your protein goals, just keep at it and don't beat yourself up if you're falling short. Just keep working on it. Keep trying to find ways that you can turn it up a little bit. Find ways that you enjoy, and give yourself credit for, turning that dial, and really stay positive about it and pay attention to how good it makes you feel, because really it comes down to you feeling better and functioning better. And when you can connect those dots on why you're doing it, it really makes the effort more worthwhile. So we are going to continue to do more live episodes. I think that this is going to be a great way for our channel to continue to, engage with you guys. And I think it's really fun. So send questions or topics. I think we'll probably continue to go through some of the topics of our challenge because it aligns well with what my challenge members are learning.
Oh, I wanted to say also, Chris did a couple live presentations at the Escapers Bash, and she's also doing them at the Escapades annual RV event, and they're about an hour long, and I'm going to put those up on the channel as well. So I recorded the live sessions, and there's a lot of good information in there, and it's a big hour-long presentation. So I'm going to put those up on the channel shortly, and that's something that everybody can watch as well.
Yeah, thanks so much for showing up. I hope you can at least take out one thing that you've learned and apply it to your life immediately.
Yeah, thanks everybody for joining in, and we'll see you guys on the next one.
Bye.